Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for coming. No problem, Vaiśeṣika Dāsa. We're glad to be here. We're continuing with our non-mode of passion reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, because frankly, we're not really in a hurry. We're not trying to prove anything per se. We are beholden to Srila Prabhupada's desire that we read his books. So that's a motivating factor. I think that trends up there towards past the mode of goodness. Yeah. Is that all right? I would like to categorize it like that. Prabhupada told his followers many times, these books are not just for selling. I would like that you read them. So, this is all of our humble attempt to do that. We're taking up where we left off, which is at the 3rd canto, 24th verse. Unless somebody else has a different idea. Do you concur? Okay. Then we're at 3:29:24. My dear mother, even if he worships with proper rituals and paraphernalia, a person who is ignorant of my presence in all living entities never pleases me by the worship of my deities in the temple. Purport, there are 64 different prescriptions for worship of the deities in the temple. There are many items offered to the deity, some valuable and some less valuable. It is prescribed in Bhagavad Gita, if a devotee offers me a small flower, a leaf, some water, or a little fruit, I will accept it. The real purpose is to exhibit one's loving devotion to the Lord. The offerings themselves are secondary. If one has not developed loving devotion to the Lord and simply offers many kinds of foodstuffs, fruits and flowers without real devotion, the offering will not be accepted by the Lord. We cannot bribe the personality of Godhead. He is so great that our bribery has no value, nor has he any scarcity, since he is full in himself. What can we offer him? Everything is produced by him. We simply offer to show our love and gratitude to the Lord. This gratitude and love for God is exhibited by a pure devotee who knows that the Lord lives in every living entity. As such, temple worship necessarily includes distribution of prasad. It is not that one should create a temple in his private apartment or private room or offer something to the Lord, and then eat. Of course, that is better than simply cooking foodstuffs and eating without understanding one's relationship with the Supreme Lord. People who act in this manner are just like animals. But the devotee who wants to elevate himself to the higher level of understanding must know that the Lord is present in every living entity. And as stated in the previous verse, one should be compassionate to other living entities. A devotee should worship the Supreme Lord, be friendly to persons who are on the same level, and be compassionate to the ignorant. One should exhibit his compassion for ignorant living entities by distributing prasad. Distribution of prasad to the ignorant masses of people is essential for persons who make offerings to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Real love and devotion is accepted by the Lord. Many valuable foodstuffs may be presented to a person, but if the person is not hungry, all such offerings are useless for him. Similarly, we may offer many valuable items to the deity, but if we have no real sense of devotion and no real sense of the Lord's presence everywhere, then we are lacking in devotional service. In such a state of ignorance, we cannot offer anything acceptable to the Lord. 25. Performing his prescribed duties, one should worship the deity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead until one realizes my presence in his own heart and in the hearts of other living entities as well. Purport: worship of the deity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is prescribed herewith even for persons who are simply discharging their prescribed duties. There are prescribed duties for the different social classes of men, the brahmanas, the vaishyas, the kshatriyas, and the shudras, and for the different ashramas, brahmacharya, grahastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. One should worship the deity of the Lord until one appreciates the presence of the Lord in every living entity. In other words, one should not be satisfied simply by discharging his duties properly. He must realize his relationship and the relationship of all other living entities with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If he does not understand this, then even though he discharges his prescribed duties properly, it is to be understood that he is simply laboring without profit. The word sukarma krit in this verse is very significant. Sukarma krit is one who engages in discharging his prescribed duties. It is not that one who has become a devotee of the Lord or who engages in devotional service should give up his prescribed duties. No one should be lazy under the plea of devotional service. One has to execute devotional service according to his prescribed duties. Sukarma krit means one should discharge the duties prescribed for him without neglect. As the blazing fire of death, I cause great fear to whoever makes the least discrimination between himself and other living entities because of a differential outlook. I'm going to read that at least one more time. It's timely. And that's all I'm going to say. As the blazing fire of death, I cause great fear to whoever makes the least discrimination between himself and other living entities because of a differential outlook. There are bodily differentiations among all varieties of living entities, but a devotee should not distinguish between one living entity and another on such a basis. A devotee's outlook should be that both the soul and the supersoul are equally present in all varieties of living entities. Therefore, through charitable gifts and attention, as well as through friendly behavior, and by viewing all to be alike, one should propitiate me who abide in all creatures as their very self. Again, we'll read this. Who knew this was in Prabhupada's books? Therefore, through charitable gifts and attention, as well as through friendly behavior, and by viewing all to be alike, one should propitiate me who abide in all creatures as their very self. That could make a nice mission vision for a community. Do I have anybody here? Can you mark it for me, please? Thank you. I hate to turn the page. I just want to live on this page. Purport: it should not be misunderstood that because the supersoul is dwelling within the heart of a living entity, the individual soul has become equal to him. The equality of the supersoul and the individual soul is misconceived by the impersonalist. Here it is distinctly mentioned that the individual soul should be recognized in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The method of worshiping the individual soul is described here as either giving charitable gifts. I'll read that again. The method of worshiping the individual soul is described here as either giving charitable gifts or behaving in a friendly manner, free from any separatist outlook. The impersonalist sometimes accepts a poor individual soul as being Daridra-narayan, meaning that Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has become poor. This is a contradiction. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is full in all opulences. He can agree to live with a poor soul or even with an animal, but this does not make him poor. There are two Sanskrit words used here, mana and dāna. Mana indicates a superior, and dāna indicates one who gives charitable gifts or is compassionate towards an inferior. We cannot treat the Supreme Personality of Godhead as an inferior who is dependent on our charitable gifts. When we give charity, it is to a person who is inferior in his material or economic condition. Charity is not given to a rich man. Similarly, it is explicitly stated here that mana, respect, is offered to a superior, and charity is offered to an inferior. The living entities, according to different results of fruitive activities, may become rich or poor, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unchangeable. He is always full in six opulences. Treating a living entity equally does not mean treating him as one would treat the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Compassion and friendliness do not necessitate falsely elevating someone to the exalted position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We should not, at the same time, misunderstand that the supersoul situated in the heart of an animal, like a hog, and the supersoul situated in the heart of a learned Brahmin are different. The supersoul in all living entities is the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. By his omnipotency, he can live anywhere, and he can create his Vaikuntha situation anywhere. That is his inconceivable potency. Therefore, when Narayan is living in the heart of a hog, he does not become a hog Narayan. He is always Narayan and is unaffected by the body of a hog. (28) Living entities are superior to inanimate objects, O Blessed Mother, and among them, living entities who display life symptoms are better. Animals with developed consciousness are better than them, and better still are those who have developed sense perception. Purport: in the previous verse, it was explained that living entities should be honored by charitable gifts and friendly behavior. And in this verse, and in the following verses, the description of different grades of living entities is given so that one can know when to behave friendly. Let me see. In the previous verse, it was explained that living entities should be honored by charitable gifts and friendly behavior. And in this verse and in the following verses, the description of different grades of living entities is given so that one can know when to behave friendly and when to give charity. For example, a tiger is a living entity, part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of God, and the Supreme Lord is living in the heart of the tiger as Supersoul. But does this mean we have to treat the tiger in a friendly manner? Certainly not. We have to treat him differently, giving him charity in the form of prasad. There's a niche there for somebody. The many saintly persons in the jungles do not treat the tigers in a friendly way, but they supply prasad foodstuffs to them. The tigers come, take the food, and go away, just as a dog does. According to the Vedic system, a dog is not allowed to enter the house. Because of their uncleanliness, cats and dogs are not allowed within the apartment of a gentleman, but are so trained that they stand outside. The compassionate householder will supply prasad to the dogs and cats, who eat outside and then go away. We must treat the lower living entities compassionately, but this does not mean that we have to treat them in the same way we treat other human beings. The feeling of equality must be there, but the treatment should be discriminating. Just how discrimination should be maintained is given in the following 6 verses concerning the different grades of living conditions. Just thought it sounded awkward. Is giving so that one can know when to behave friendly. Does that sound smooth? When to behave friendly? Maybe it's just me.
I think that friendly is usually used as an adjective.
Yeah.
It's used as an adverb, but
Yeah.
it doesn't end with ly, so
It doesn't,
we're not accustomed to it.
yeah, it sounds awkward, but it's technically okay. The first division is made between dead, stone-like matter and the living organism. A living organism is sometimes manifested even in stone. Experience shows that some hills and mountains grow. This is due to the presence of the soul within that stone. Above that, the next manifestation of the living condition is development of consciousness. And the next manifestation is the development of sense perception. In the Moksha Dharma section of the Mahabharata, it is stated that trees have developed sense perception. They can see and smell. We know by experience that trees can see. Sometimes in its growth, a large tree changes its course of development to avoid some hindrances. This means that a tree can see. And according to Mahabharata, a tree can also smell. This indicates the development of sense perception. Among the living entities who have developed sense perception, those who have developed the sense of taste are better than those who have developed only the sense of touch. Better than them are those who have developed the sense of smell, and better still are those who have developed the sense of hearing. Although Westerners accept that Darwin first expounded the doctrine of evolution, the science of anthropology is not new. The development of the evolutionary process was known long before from the Bhagavatam, which was written 5,000 years ago. There are records of the statements of Kapila Muni, who was present almost in the beginning of creation. This knowledge has existed since the Vedic time, and all these sequences are disclosed in Vedic literature. The theory of gradual evolution or anthropology is not new to the Vedas. It is said here that amongst the trees there are also evolutionary processes. The different kinds of trees have touch perception. It is said that better than the trees are the fish, because fish have developed the sense of taste. Better than the fish are the bees, who have developed the sense of smell. And better than them are the serpents, because the serpents have developed the sense of hearing. In the darkness of night, a snake can find its eatables simply by hearing the frog's very pleasant cry. The snake can understand, there is the frog, and he captures the frog simply because of its sound vibration. This example is sometimes given for persons who vibrate sounds simply for death. One may have a very nice tongue that can vibrate sounds like the frogs, but that kind of vibration is simply calling death. The best use of the tongue and of sound vibration is to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. That will protect one from the hands of cruel death. Better than those living entities who can perceive sound and those who can distinguish, better than those living entities who can perceive sound are those who can distinguish between one form and another. Better than them are those who have developed upper and lower sets of teeth. And better still are those who have many legs. Better than them are the quadrupeds, and better than them are the human beings. Purport. It is said that certain birds, such as crows, can distinguish one form from another. Living entities that have many legs, like the wasp, are better than plants and grasses, which have no legs. Four-legged animals are better than many-legged living entities, and better than the animals is the human being, who has only 2 legs. Among the human beings, the society which is divided according to quality and work is best. And in that society, the intelligent men who are designated as brahmanas are best. Among the brahmanas, one who has studied the Vedas is the best. And among the brahmanas who have studied the Vedas, one who knows the actual purport of the Vedas is the best. Purport. The system of 4 classifications in human society, according to quality and work, is very scientific. This system of brahmanas, kshatriyas, and vaishyas and shudras has now become vitiated as the present caste system in India, but it appears that this system has been current a very long time, since it is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. Unless there is such a division of the social orders in human society, including the intelligent class, the martial class, the mercantile class, and the laborer class, there is always confusion as to who is to work for what purpose. A person trained to the stage of understanding the absolute truth is a brahmana, and when such a brahmana is vedagya, he understands the purpose of Veda. The purpose of Veda is to understand the absolute. One who understands the absolute truth in three phases, namely Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, and who understands the term Bhagavan to mean the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is considered to be the best of the Brahmanas, or a Vaishnava. Better than the Brahmana who knows the purpose of the Vedas is he who can dissipate all doubts. And better than him is one who strictly follows the Brahminical principles. Better than him is the one who is liberated from all material contamination. And better than him is a pure devotee who executes devotional service without expectation of reward. Artagya Brahmana refers to one who has made a thorough analytical study of the Absolute Truth and who knows that the Absolute Truth is realized in three different phases, namely Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. If someone not only has this knowledge, but is able to clear all doubts if questioned about the Absolute Truth, he is considered better. Further, there may be a learned Brahmana Vaishnava who can explain clearly and eradicate all doubts. But if he does not follow the Vaishnava principles, then he is not situated on a higher level. One must be able to clear all doubts and simultaneously be situated in the Brahminical characteristics. Such a person who knows the purpose of the Vedic injunctions, who can employ the principles laid down in the Vedic literatures, and who teaches his disciples in that way is called an acharya. The position of an acharya is that he executes devotional service with no desire for elevation to a higher position of life. The highest perfectional Brahmana is the Vaishnava. A Vaishnava who knows the science of the Absolute Truth but is not able to preach such knowledge to others is described as being in the lower stage. One who not only understands the principles of the science of God but can also preach is in the second stage, and one who not only can preach but who also sees everything in the Absolute Truth and the Absolute Truth in everything is in the highest class of Vaishnavas. It is mentioned here that a Vaishnava is already a Brahmana. In fact, the highest stage of Brahminical perfection is reached when one becomes a Vaishnava. Therefore, I do not find a greater person than he who has no interest outside of mine, and who therefore engages and dedicates all his activities and all his life, everything, unto me without cessation. Purport. In this verse, the word samadarsanat means that he no longer has any separate interest. The devotee's interest and the Supreme Personality of Godhead's interest are one. For example, Lord Chaitanya, in the role of a devotee, also preached the same philosophy. He preached that Krishna is the worshipful Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that the interest of his pure devotees is the same as his own. Sometimes Mayavadi philosophers, due to a poor fund of knowledge, define the word samadarsanat to mean that a devotee should see himself as one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is foolishness. When one thinks himself one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no question of serving him. When there is service, there must be a master. Three things must be present for there to be service: the master, the servant, and the service. Here it is clearly stated that he who has dedicated his life, all his activities, his mind and soul, everything, for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord is considered to be the greatest person. The word akartu means without any sense of proprietorship. Everyone wants to act as the proprietor of his actions so that he can enjoy the result. A devotee, however, has no such desire. He acts because the personality of Godhead wants him to act in a particular way. He has no personal motive. When Lord Chaitanya preached Krishna consciousness, it was not with the purpose that people would call him Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rather, he preached that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and should be worshipped as such. A devotee who is a most confidential servant of the Lord never does anything for his personal account, but does everything for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. It is clearly stated, therefore, Mai Sanyasya Karmana. The devotee works, but he works for the Supreme. It is also stated, Mayar bhūtātmānaṁ. He gives his mind unto me. These are the qualifications of a devotee, who according to this verse is accepted as the highest of all human beings. Question? Oh, yes. Yeah, sure.
So I'm just trying to look for the verse where it says that for the deity worship is ultimately to realize that the Lord is in the heart. It says that it should culminate to the understanding that the Lord is in the heart. Which one? 25. Okay. Performing his prescribed duties, one should worship the deity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead until one realizes my presence in his own heart and in the hearts of the other living entities as well. Can you give a little explanation to this? Is the deity worship ultimately, should it culminate to this understanding? And because we don't give so much stress, we are so much external generally with so many things going outside, blah blah, this thing, that thing, this yatra, that Rath yatra, but kind of it takes a toll sometimes. So.
Yeah.
Makes sense
I'll
what
just
I say?
start from a particular perspective, and then we can work our way to Siddhanta. One way to look at it is the description of the different levels of devotees. There's description of Uttam, the Madhyam, and Kanishta, given in 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And the starting with the Kanishtas describe Archaryam eva haraye pujam yasharaye hete natad bhakteshu chanyeshu sabhakta prakrita smritaha. So this level of understanding Krishna is considered faulty. That's why it says sabhakta prakrita smrita. This level in which the devotee only sees the deity, Archaryam eva haraye, sees the Lord there in the deity. Pujam, sharaye, has faith in the puja of the deity. Natad bhakteshu chanyesu means, but doesn't see that devotees are worshipable, doesn't know how to worship a devotee. And cha anyeshu means also doesn't know that the Lord's in everyone's heart and doesn't know how to do good for others. Sabhakta prakritasma, such a devotee is considered a materialistic devotee, and it's generous that they're called a Vaishnav, because Vaishnavas are not prakrita. So when one comes to the understanding that the Lord is expanded with, hey Srisham, it's expanded within everyone's heart and knows how to do good for others, ishvaret tadadineshu balisheshu dusachucha prema maitri kripopeksha ya karoty samadhimaha, that middle level, then one's considered to be very exalted, because it sees four categories: the Lord, the devotees, the innocent, and those who are against the Lord, and then acts appropriately towards each one of them. Most importantly, and in relationship to this idea, is that for those who are balisheshu, means they're innocent, that he gives kripa as much as possible. So he recognizes the Lord's everywhere. And the overall overarching theme, if that's possible to say, in the Bhagavatam is that this is the highest method of worshiping the Lord. For instance, in the 8th canto, when the ocean of milk pastime is unfolding and hala hala poison comes out, and then Shiva saves the universe. Shukadev Goswami remarks, Tapyante lukatapena sarva prayasojana parama aradaram tadi purushasya kilamana. The parama aradaram, or the highest method of worshiping the Lord, is tapyante lukatapena, is to take some austerity for the sake of helping others who are parts and parcel of the Lord. And we also heard the verses that if you worship the Lord in the temple, but you don't do good for the living entities by giving them Krishna consciousness, it's like doing a yajna and pouring ghee into ashes. So from that point of view, we are meant to evolve. And fortunately, Prabhupada gave us from the very beginning the context of the deity worship is there. He'd say these are centers from which we go out to save others. And he emphasized that again and again. So did our previous acharyas like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, etc., with the same idea.
But before we go out, we have also to deal with our community of devotees also. And I was asking in that context. So from what you said, it also clear that one of the austerities that we need to perform is to tolerate the other devotees in terms of, what we face in terms of behavior issues and things like that.
In terms of?
In terms of, the behaviors and other things, so we need to tolerate and see the good in them rather than. So that's a big austerity.
Yeah, it's a big austerity.
Am I correct?
Yeah, it's indicative of somebody who, as you said yesterday, realizes the presence of the super soul and also is endeavoring to follow Krishna's mood in dealing with others. Yeah. Yes.
Hare Krishna. This reminded me of the verse from the Bhagavad Gita, Atmopamyena sarvatra samam pashyati arjuna sukham va yadi va dukkam sayogi paramo mataha. That the highest yogi is the one who sees everyone by comparison with his own self, sees everyone equally in both their happiness and distress. So it's kind of like it's emphasizing the oneness. Usually in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we focus on the difference, but this section is kind of calling upon us to recognize also that there is a oneness. It's a Chintya Beta Tattva, but we tend to focus on the beta and minimize the abeta. But there is a sense in which we are also one, because we're all the same super soul, one super soul. He's in all of our hearts, and also even as individual souls, we're all, mamaivam so jiva loke. We're all parts and parcels of the one Krishna. So our experience of, the human experience in this world is very common. The ways in which we become happy, the ways in which we become distressed, stressed, or anxiety, like that. It's very similar. We have similar life experiences. We have similar struggles in our sojourn through the material world. So, we have to be kind to each other and use a little more empathy.
Empathy, that's the word that I really like in relationship to the Atmopamyena.
Yeah, it's the empathy verse. Yeah.
Yes, that's a more advanced stage, as the verse you just quoted indicates. It's the sense of empathy. You feel what's inside of other people because you've felt it yourself, and then you feel for them. That's Vaishnav, obviously, is par dukkha dukkhi. So all those are in the mood of many of these verses describing, yes, the sense of empathy.
Yeah, it's very instructive and interesting. Kapila Dev breaks it down and talks about how the different, living entities are superior to others, ending in the pure devotee who sees the presence of the Lord. So in different ways he's bringing us to that conception, including that one verse. What was that? Krishna says, the person who doesn't.
As the blazing fire of death, I cause great fear to whoever makes the least discrimination between himself and other living entities because of a differential outlook.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it shows the importance of this concept.
It's more better. Okay?
27 or 28? Which one?
27 is the blazing fire one?
Yeah, blazing fire. 26? Yeah, 26.
It's right here. On my phone? On my
26, right?
27.
We have 26 on ours. You got the...
The one that says there's a blazing fire of death is 26 in here?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Well, 27. Interesting.
Which BBT did you get that from?
Oh, actually, this is funny. 25 to 27. There are two 27s. Okay, fine.
Okay, before we take more inside here, we'll take a couple outside. Outside People's Party. Do you have a representative? Do you have any points or questions? Yadutama? Prabhu? He's struggling with a dead mic. Is it systemic or just that one mic? We'll get you traded. We're sending our tech team out right now as we speak. Our team will be to you in 7 seconds or less, or your money back from today's seminar. I'd like to take this time to appreciate the technical team. They're working around the clock to make sure this happens. They extend the wires, they bring them back in. They have to be constantly tuning everything, making sure it's all working. Thank you very much to all of you. Is there an update? No? Okay. We lost a couple of members. We got no sound. We lost our cast and went hungry. So which verse are we on?
54.
Okay. I don't know if this is the right thing because I'm not getting communication from the outside world, but we're going to continue. Okay. Such a perfect devotee offers respects to every living...
Hare Krishna. Okay. I was saying you shouldn't have clapped yet because I didn't...
No, we really appreciate what you're doing. Okay, Yudhutama, go ahead, please.
This is maybe a general question, but it's something I've meditated on a lot. I really appreciate Prabhupada's these verses and then Prabhupada's commentaries on the different levels of human beings moving up to the perfect Vaishnav. It's actually really inspiring because you can see it as a ladder, right? But in my devotional life, and I think not only in many devotees probably, Prabhupada set such a high standard that when we read about how we should be, and there's a section I think last chapter was Prabhupada was also saying a devotee should do this, a devotee should do this, which is also really nice. How do we not become morose when we don't see ourselves acting on that level? And also, moreover, what's the best position that we should take while preaching and trying to encourage fledgling devotees when they feel they don't, they're not on the level, so to speak?
The best way to encourage new people is to teach them the process that you already know, chanting Hare Krishna, like Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, and just being straightforward, answering their questions to the best of your ability, and being a friend and helping support them. And the way to not become morose is to remember, as Krishna says in the verse I quoted yesterday, where he says, Gaudiyan at the end, said you can be aware of the fact that you're not where you want to be, but you shouldn't become overly concerned, because when you continue the process, then you'll make advancement. And there's a way in which Krishna says to Uddhava in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, very encouragingly, Swe Swe Adhikarya Nishta Saguna Parikirtita, that everyone should act according to the level they're at now. Whatever your adhikari is, that's acting according to that is a good quality. I do find that when devotees resign themselves, in a sense, to the position they're in now and feel comfortable with it, with no pretense, they become very attractive. People appreciate that they have a level and they're acting on it according to their means at that particular time. And of course, Kaviraj Goswami says at the end of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, birds fly in the sky as high as they're able, but the sky's unlimited. So whatever level you're at, there's always a way to increase. And finally, I would say, and not exhaustively, but just for the sake of answering this particular question, is we can also appreciate from whatever we're doing that we're following the footsteps of the great souls, and that's all that's really asked. That verse, which is in the 10th canto, 2nd chapter, Swayam Bhujaksha Kila Satvadamni Samani Naveshit Chetasaike Pada Putena Mahat Kritena Kurvanti Kovatsapadam Vabhabdim, says that even if you're not a great soul, if you follow in the footsteps of the Mahat, or the great souls, then not only are you considered a great soul because you're following a great soul, but you also attain the same result that they got. In fact, that's one of the verses in the 1st canto, 2nd chapter, Bejare Muneyotagre Bhagavantam Toksajam Sattvam Vishuddham Shemaya Kalpante Yenutaniha, that previously the great devotees worshipped Lord Vishnu because of his being beyond the 3 modes of material nature, and they knew that they would achieve the highest benefit from worshipping him. And it says, even those that aren't great sages, who follow in the footsteps of those kalpantya yenutaniha, in this world, whoever follows the great sage souls is also eligible for the same result. So that's another inspiring aspect of devotional service, is that just the act of anu, or following in the footsteps of the great acharyas, acharyopasanam, makes one great. In fact, you can't become great if you don't follow in the footsteps of the great souls. And a lot of these lists are, like in the 11th canto, there's a list where Krishna's talking about who he likes. And it mentions there specifically he likes humans. So you can cheer up. Krishna likes you if you're a human. You can get a little bumper sticker. Krishna likes humans. Okay, We have a few more verses.
What was that verse in the 11th canto? Sorry for interrupting.
Sway sway adhikarayanishta. There's
11.
two sway sway verses there, so you want the one that says sway sway adhikarayanishta saguna parikirtita. We'll give you the verse and number. Where are we now? May I? Okay. Such a perfect devotee offers respects to every living entity because he is under the firm conviction that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has entered the body of every living entity as the supersoul or controller. Purport: a perfect devotee, as described above, does not make the mistake of thinking that because the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Paramatma has entered into the body of every living entity has become the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is foolishness. Suppose a person enters into a room. That does not mean that the room has become that person. Similarly, that the Supreme Lord has entered into each of the 8,400,000 particular types of material bodies does not mean that each of these bodies has become the Supreme Lord. Because the Supreme Lord is present, however, a pure devotee accepts each body as the temple of the Lord, and since the devotee offers respect to such temples in full knowledge, he gives respect to every living entity in relationship with the Lord. Mayavadi philosophers wrongly think that because of the Supreme Person has entered the body of a poor man, the Supreme Lord has become Daridra Narayan, or poor Narayan. These are all blasphemous statements of atheists and non-devotees. Was there somebody online and I skipped you, didn't I? I skipped them. We want to encourage our online audience. Go ahead. Stivyanga. Hare Krishna Div. Okay. Is there a message? What did he say?
It's just a comment. He's saying, read, sell, read, sell.
Read, sell, read, sell. Like chant dance. Okay. 35. My dear mother, O daughter of Manu, a devotee who applies the science of devotional service and mystic yoga in this way can achieve the abode of the Supreme Personality of the Supreme Person simply by that devotional service. Yudhutthama, this one, listen. My dear mother, O daughter of Manu, a devotee who applies the science of devotional service and mystic yoga in this way can achieve the abode of the Supreme Person simply by that devotional service. Purport: herein, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kapila perfectly explains that the mystic yoga system, consisting of 8 different kinds of yoga activities, has to be performed with the aim of coming to the perfectional stage of bhakti yoga. It is not acceptable for one to be satisfied simply by practicing the sitting postures and thinking himself complete. By meditation, one must attain the stage of devotional service. As previously described, a yogi is advised to meditate on the form of Lord Vishnu from point to point, from the ankles to the legs, to the knees, to the thighs, to the chest, to the neck, and in this way gradually up to the face, and then to the ornaments. There is no question of impersonal meditation. When by meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead in full detail, one comes to the point of love of God, that is the point of bhakti yoga. And at that point, he must actually render service to the Lord out of transcendental love. Anyone who practices yoga and comes to the point of devotional service can attain the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his transcendental abode. Here it is clearly stated, Purusha Purusham Vrajat. The Purusha, the living entity, goes to the Supreme Person. The Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity are qualitatively one. Both are defined as Purusha. The quality of Purusha exists both in the Supreme Godhead and in the living entity. Purusha means enjoyer, and the spirit of enjoyment is present both in the living entity and in the Supreme Lord. The difference is that the quantity of enjoyment is not equal. The living entity cannot experience the same quantity of enjoyment as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. An analogy may be made with a rich man and a poor man. The propensity for enjoyment is present in both, but the poor man cannot enjoy in the same quantity as the rich man. When the poor man dovetails his desires with those of the rich man, however, and when there is cooperation between the poor man and the rich man, or between the big and the small man, then the enjoyment is shared equally. That is like bhakti yoga. Purusha purusham vrajet. When the living entity enters into the kingdom of God and cooperates with the Supreme Lord by giving him enjoyment, he enjoys the same facility or the same amount of pleasure as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Did you all hear that? On the other hand, when the living entity wants to enjoy by imitating the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his desire is called Maya, and it puts him in the material atmosphere. A living entity who wants to enjoy on his personal account and does not cooperate with the Supreme Lord is engaged in materialistic life. As soon as he dovetails his enjoyment with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is engaged in spiritual life. An example may be cited here. The different limbs of the body cannot enjoy life independently. They must cooperate with the whole body and supply food to the stomach. In so doing, all the different parts of the body enjoy equally in cooperation with the whole body. That is the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bhed, simultaneous oneness and difference. The living entity cannot enjoy life in opposition to the Supreme Lord. He has to dovetail his activities with the Lord by practicing bhakti yoga. It is said herein that one can approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead by either the yoga process or the bhakti yoga process. This indicates that factually there is no difference between yoga and bhakti yoga because the target of both is Vishnu. In the modern age, however, a yoga process has been manufactured which aims at something void and impersonal. Actually, yoga means meditation on the form of Lord Vishnu. If the yoga practice is actually performed according to the standard direction, there's no difference between yoga and bhakti yoga. And that brings us to the cow break. We'll be back here at 10 minutes after 5.
The verse to the microphone is
11.20.26. Sweswe adhikari. Yanishta saguna parikirtita. Viparyo dosha syad. Ubaryo evanishchaya. Om Tat Sat. See you in 9 minutes. All right, we'll come at 15 after. Hare Krishna.